Awesome to welcome Boston Celtics performance enhancement coach Phil Pressey to the Basketball Podcast. Known for his strategic mind and ability to develop players, Phil is a rising star in the coaching world. After serving as a graduate assistant at Missouri, he joined the Celtics coaching staff in 2023, bringing his court vision and leadership to the sidelines. Phil's basketball roots run deep. The son of former NBA player and coach Paul Pressey, Phil has basketball in his DNA. His playing career began at the University of Missouri, where he set records for assists and steals, earning first-team All-SEC honors in 2013. Despite going undrafted in 2013 NBA draft, his tenacity and skill earned him a spot with the Boston Celtics, where he played as a point guard. His professional career also included stints with Philadelphia 76ers, Phoenix Suns, and several international teams. Perfect. Phil, welcome to the podcast, and congratulations, NBA champion.
Thanks for having me. Long time no see. It's good to be here.
Man, so we connected, University of Missouri. You were on Dennis Gates' staff and doing great stuff. We had some great conversations there. And then with the Boston Celtics. And I think one of the most important reasons I wanted to have you on is I believe you've done a really great job at transitioning from player to coach and putting yourself in a position where you can coach essentially if you want to for the rest of your life. Can you highlight that for our audience?
Yeah, I have great mentors. Like my father, he went from player to coach. So he helped me make this transition, me being a player all my life, but I was also a coach on the floor. So like I was always an extension, especially being a point guard, having to know the plays better than the rest of my team, holding myself accountable, being on time, showing up every single day. And as I made the transition into coaching, it was similar. But one thing I did learn that it's just as difficult to coach as it is to play. And I had to instill the growth mindset of being a lifelong learner and constantly learning new ideas and philosophies. It's still a challenge, but I have a great group of coaches around me who are mentoring me.
It's so important. And yeah, just talk a little bit more about that mentorship from University of Missouri to the Boston Celtics. It wasn't just that you had great mentors around you. My impression, at least in talking to you and the other people around you, is you seeked it out mentors to be able to help you. You didn't go in with this idea that I have the answers. I'm going to really be humble and learn.
For sure. I think it was probably 220 when I started having the idea of possibly transitioning into coaching. But I took an assistant coaching program, which the NBA assesses for retired players. And that kind of helped me get the ball moving. And then I was able to get a position with my alma mater, University of Missouri, and just being around that coaching staff, they really helped me develop. A couple of those guys up there, like me being a point guard, I love offense, I love plays, and once I met Matt Klein, he opened my eyes to a different way of thinking, and it took me a second to grasp it. But now that I'm progressing throughout my career, it's actually pretty amazing to see the ideas and philosophy that he had a couple years ago is spreading everywhere. And then I'm pretty sure it comes from you and you got it from somebody else. So that's the beautiful thing about basketball.
Yeah, like Matt Klein dove fully in on learning, not just becoming a member of Basketball Immersion, but he dove fully into learning the science behind it, the evidence-based ideas behind it. And I'm so grateful that he has helped spread it to people like you and other people. And this really conceptual approach to not just playing the game, but teaching the game. And for you as a former player, what resonated with you with that type of style and that type of practice style for offense? Instead of doing these memorized repetitive drills, you are basically always game-based.
Yeah, and I'm still learning, right? I'm still grasping onto this concept and idea of CLA. It's still taking time because it's so new to me, right? What I've learned my whole career, my whole life was what you just mentioned, the memorizing and doing the repetitive over and over again. But I feel like this is an addition to basketball in a different way, a different approach, and it literally enhancing the game and teaching the game. The biggest thing that stuck with me was the small-sided games, making instead of because basketball is a group invasion game, taking these small-sided games allows everybody to kind of think collectively, like smaller. So I don't know. I'm still learning it as we go, but I'm just happy to be able to be in this ballpark.
And since we're down this path, I visited the Celtics, spent some time when Brad Stevens was the coach, and I know they were doing some stuff ahead of other people back then too. Yeah. There was like essentially in a practice, one player or two players were working out, with a whole bunch of coaches, basically in a small-sided game, simulating it. So can you highlight that fact? And I know they're still doing it in some way.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So yeah, being able to have smaller groups allows us to focus in on what we're trying to accomplish because we have multiple coaches. And that's we talk about the player enhancement coach, a coach being able to do multiple things. It allows us to give the players real looks. We try to put them in game-like situations that replicate the environment that they're going to be in. And I think the players love it, right? Because they're constantly tested. Their mind is tested. They're engaged. They're more engaged. And this is, like I said, this is something that it's new to me. So I'm learning as I coach as well.
But it resonates with you because, again, a certain amount of practice, I get it, is boring. It's just you got to do the work, but it doesn't have to be as boring as we make it sometimes, does it? And that's really why when you said players enjoy it, they enjoy it because it's meaningful learning rather than this rote learning, which is just memorize, regurgitate.
Exactly. And as the players get better and their IQ is higher, the talent level progresses, they can become disengaged because it becomes too easy. So if you're practicing more randomized, they don't know what's coming. To where a block, they can just do it with their eyes closed. So being able to challenge them on a level is definitely pretty cool to see, especially when they're engaged and they're upset about not being able to do what you're trying to get them to do, or they can't beat the drill. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. And you mentioned basketball IQ a number of times, and I'm in the youth basketball circle now,
Mhm.
just at UYBL Peach Jam. Man, I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times I've heard the word basketball IQ in terms of we need to improve players' basketball IQ. Talk to us about that because I know that was so important to your success as a player. And now, as a coach, what are some ways that you're helping players enhance their basketball IQ?
Teaching them to make better decisions, right? And I think the better players make the best decisions more frequently. And you talk about decisions. I think that's all about perception and teaching them where to look, being able to, through small sided games, teach them where to look and where they're looking for, helps them translate that into the game. That's what I think IQ is just decision making. The
It
best
is
players who make the
absolutely. Sorry, I was just
yeah
going to stop you and say, because one thing I want to jump on that you said, which I think
yeah
is so important, which is teach them where to look. This scanning. And I'm sure if we tracked it back in the day when you
yeah
played, your scanning ability was elite. So teaching them
yeah
where to look. Talk to us more about that.
yeah. So like me being a point guard, I study guys like Chris Paul and Steve Nash, and I watch highlights, I watch film, and I think it is a big reason why I was a pretty good scanner, is because that's what I was looking for. So me studying Steve Nash and Chris Paul, they taught me how to scan the floor. That's what we're doing now with our players. And one of my biggest growth edges as I progress is not assuming, right? Not assuming that players are watching how I watched film when I was a kid. So we actually work on scanning. Craig Lucianet, one of our development director, we work on scanning, and that was a new, like literally called scanning, and that was a new drill that we did, and it was pretty cool because the players are like, "What's going on?" But little do they know, they're more and more they do this, the better they're gonna become.
Coaches dive into this. There's tons of research on scanning. A lot of it's in soccer, football, different things like that, but it applies to basketball and invasion sports, as Phil said. But maybe go a little bit deeper. When you work on scanning, how are you actually working on scanning?
It could be on offense or it can be on defense, right? If you're on defense, you're on the weak side, teaching the player that they should be scanning. It's more a modern way to say see man and ball. Like we say that as coaches, see man and ball, see man and ball. But like telling the player to scan the floor and being able to see what's happening, like with ball side, but also scanning weak side. And you should be constantly scanning what's going on. Similar to an outlet pass in transition, right? You're getting an outlet pass and you should be scanning and looking down the floor to be able to see what's happening next. I read it in a book by Doug Lamoe. He talked about soccer's first touch. Great soccer players on their first touch, they already know what they're about to do. So it's similar to in basketball, like on your first touch, you should be scanning the floor, knowing what's about to happen next. And you can teach that through practice.
You can teach that through practice, but you can't teach that through on-air repetitions where there's no visual stimuli and no distracting information. And that's really one of the main things that we try and share with people is that just add a defender, whether it's guided or live. And talk to us about
Yeah.
that, because I know you do a lot of guided type of defensive stuff to be able to stimulate offense and decision making.
Yeah, and it's like I think you have to teach the technique first and try to get them to understand what you're trying to accomplish. And you like transition from block to interleave to random. Being able to distinguish between the three, I think allows you to teach better. So like on defense, that's something that I've been able to be around this past year. It's pretty cool to see how we're able to use offense to teach defense and defense to teach offense. But yeah, man, it's definitely it's a challenge for a coach because you're having to be more creative.
Love it. And for me, coming back to the video piece, which you talked
Yeah.
about as saying that you can't assume a player knows how to watch film. And I'm guessing particularly a new player, whether to your team or a new player in the NBA, teaching them how to watch film and what to look for and how to actually improve their decision making while they watch film. So talk to us. You sit down a lot before games, you sit down with players, you show them clips, you show them film. Can you take us through that process of what you're doing and how you're doing it?
Yeah, it's organized in how you do it. It's like there's different eyes that you're watching film. Like it's like you're changing your glasses, right? You can be watching for scouting purposes to where you're looking at strategies and tactics, or you can be watching for player development to where you're looking at making the right decision, or you could be watching from personnel based to where you're looking at different players and seeing their strengths versus their weaknesses. So there's different glasses or lenses that you're looking at each film study. So that's a way I didn't know that as a player, right? I'm watching it as a player just with one set of glasses. And I'm like, no, there's different ways. So as I get into teaching the game, it's being able to get the players to change their glasses when they're watching film. And I think we do that. We do a good job of that with the Celtics. But
Are
it's
you
yeah.
cueing them specifically? Like when you're sitting down with them, or saying this clip, you're watching it with this pair of glasses?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. They understand if we're on the offensive side or if we're on the defensive side. If it's more individualized, they're focused on the player development. Whoever their specific coach is, there's a strategy for that in watching film, right? You're not just freestyling it. It's very specific. It's very intentional, and I think that's the best way to get any type of improvement.
How many types of clips do you feel that you can maintain their attention and get something out of it for them? I know there's not an exact number, but give us a feel for that. Because I'm sure as a player back in the day, because I was a coach back in the day too, we watched too
Hmm.
much film, right? We watched too much
Exactly.
film and they didn't get enough out of it. So talk to us about that process.
Yeah, you don't want to overload. You don't want to give them too much and overload their thinking, their memory. That it's a challenge, right? You have to have a feel for it. You got to be, like I said, intentional about what you're showing them and what you're not showing them. But that's an area where I'm still growing and I'm still learning is what's too much and what's not enough. There's that sweet spot. There's coaches that are better than me in that area, but that's something that I think is so important for a coach to understand is, of course, you want to show them film, but you don't want to overload their working memory.
Another reason I wanted to have you on is because, again, you come from this unique perspective, but also in your role right now with a professional team, like everyone thinks about the front of the bench and the coaches at the front of the bench, and you're not at the front of the bench yet.
Yeah.
So take us through the process. What do you do during games? What is the value that you add during games? Because I know it's a lot, but it's different than what we perceive as a coach sitting on the bench.
Yeah. Part of our philosophy with the Celtics is everything matters, everyone matters. So it's a team, right? Like me getting into sports as a player, I enjoy being part of a team. Now being on the coaching side, uh, we're on it. We're a team as well. We're just not playing. We have the head coach, we have the assistants, we have the what we call player enhancement coaches. Everybody has a role and everybody matters. Like my specific role, I'm doing a little bit of everything. I'm doing some player development, I'm doing some video, and I'm assisting with scouting. I'm getting the ability to grow in each one of those areas. And now because of the need for video and how technology has improved over time, like being in video is the best thing I can be in, is because I'm learning how to, like you said, show film. because film is everything, right? How do you learn if you can't see? And that's something that I said the best decision makers are able to know where to look. So through film, I'm able to teach and show players where to look. And that's what I'm doing on an everyday basis. Just pretty much assisting anybody who needs help. And throughout a team, everybody has a role and you have to play your role.
So I love this because one of the barriers to entry I learned, especially from a former NBA player to a coach position, the barrier to entry sometimes is technology. It's being able to use sports code. It's being able to do video. It's being able to do these different things. I know that the NBA has some programs in place. The NBA, I was just with them at Peach Jam with Nike, and they did a sports code session for coaches.
Yeah.
So take us through that process, because that barrier to entry is a real barrier to entry.
Yeah. And what we started with, I mentioned to you, like what got you for me in the NBA as a player, or me as a pro, as a player, is not gonna get me to where I want to get to in coaching. So as I transitioned into coaching, there were new skills that I had to learn, I had to develop. And video and sports code was one of them, right? There's also other, like PowerPoint, being able to stay in front of in public speaking, talk in front of a team. These are like specific skills that allow you to elevate in your career in coaching. And that's what I'm learning. I'm so happy because I love being a lifelong learner. Like even when I do feel like I know it all, I still know I don't know it all. So that's like where I'm at. But yeah, just learning these new skills and video specifically has allowed me to kind of transition better.
You mentioned some things around, okay, transitioning from player to coach is not as easy as it seems. So talk to us about some of those things that were maybe more challenging than you thought transitioning from player to coach.
Teaching. When I thought about coaching, I'm just thinking about the X's and O's and running or having a specific defense to stop your opponents. As a player, I'm a big journaler and I'm always journaling. I'm always like all the coaches I played for in Europe, I've taken a couple of their sets, a couple of their defensive tactics, and I'm combining my own philosophy. But then I get into it, I'm like, no, we're teachers, right? Coaches are teachers. So learning how to teach has been a great challenge for me, but that's something that I'm bought into. And going to the University of Missouri, like I said, being around the assistant coaches, Matt Klein, he's literally taught me the word skill acquisition. When he first told me that, what's this dude talking about? But then actually now that I'm like I said, progressing, I'm starting to learn it more and more. But yeah, I'm just trying to become a better teacher. And I know the better teacher I become, the better coach I'll become.
And that's why, in part, I know you remember basketball immersion too. And in part, like we focus not on what to teach, but how to teach. Because again, that translates to any program you go to, whether in Europe, you're in college, you're in the NBA.
Yeah.
How to teach helps you everywhere. And that's one of the elite skills beyond networking that you can develop, isn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's going to be new for a lot of players that go into coaching. And you have to be uncomfortable. And when you're learning new things and you're growing, there's those things called growing pains, right? So if you're uncomfortable and things don't seem as easy as they used to be, you're right where you're supposed to be. So there was a lot of times where I'm confused and I'm trying to figure it out, but that's how I know I'm exactly where I need to be.
So you just said something that I want to ask you about players, because now that you're in these situations where you're doing some of these small-sided games and these different types of perceptual type of drills, where players are going to be less comfortable than when they do the memorized reps, the repetitive reps of shooting, finishing moves, etc. So some players initially must have a discomfort with this. So talk to us about that process. You just came back from summer league, so sure some players have felt that. So talk to us about that process of helping them through that and getting them to understand that this is a better way.
Yeah. Talking about that process, like when we work with players, we had one of our better shooters on the team, one of our coaches, Ross McMahon, he's working with them. And Ross is like trying to get him to do this specific footwork, right? And he can't do it, right? He can do it the way he wants to. If we were just to say, we're going to do a block practice, I want you to do this footwork the same way, he could do it. But once we started adding in these other obstacles throughout the practice or through the small sided games, he couldn't do it, right? Because he had to think about multiple things while he had to shoot. So as I'm watching this process, I'm like, wow, this guy, if we just have him just catch and shoot 100 shots, he's not going to miss a shot. But then once we started throwing in these different randomized practices, he wasn't as good. But he improved over time. I spoke with Ross. I'm like, man, he's gotten better from day one to day 100 or whatever it was. I'm like that, and that's where I was like, man, this actually it makes sense to me.
It makes sense to you. It doesn't always make sense to the player because they're going,
Yeah,
wait, I'm making shots, but
yeah,
you're not making shots in a representative environment. And
yeah,
that's the struggle. That's where you're trying to connect it immediately for them, that this practice is helping you in a game, whereas this blocked memorized practice doesn't necessarily help you in a game because you've already got that technique. Now we got to
hmm
make the technique transferable to the game. And that's the key part of all learning. But especially, I imagine, for a professional athlete, if you can't do it in a game, you're not going to play in the game.
yeah. And my question to you, and it's something that I can go back and forth on, is because I was raised on more of a block practice, more traditionally. And as I transition to learning more, how important do you think it is for at the youth level to teach block practices so they can build up those reps? They can build up that a word I love, myelin, in their brain, and they can build it up through practice and practice. So when they do get in these real reps or real game like situations, they don't even have to think about it. They just do it. So how do you feel about that?
Number one, adaptability is more important than repeatability. So
Okay.
adaptability to game situations is more important. Now, saying that, it's definitely a balance. You have to marry the two ideas. I'm not an extremist. The ecological dynamics CLA is beautiful stuff, and I love it. I'm dominant in that way. But they definitely need some technique-based training because that brings them comfort and confidence. Just like I'd say, okay, I would never start with 5-on-0. I would do 5-on-5 and then figure out
Mm,
what they actually need and then do 5-on-0 because a certain amount of structure frees the player from decisions. Freedom from decisions actually helps a player. So it's an awesome question, Phil. So I would say for a young player, it's the same idea. Put them in a game situation, let them explore within that environment, and then do some explicit instruction where they need some specific technique based training, whether that's on air or it's one on one or some task simplification, and then put them back in the game again and see how it helps them and see where it goes. And mainly, which is the next part of the question for you, is instead of telling them, and I know your whole organization is big on this, ask them, ask questions.
yeah,
How does it feel? What did you see here? All these different things. So
yeah,
talk to us about
yeah.
the power of questioning.
Oh, it's everything. Like the power of questioning is everything. And I had the honor of coaching or help assisting coaching in summer league. And I was coaching the defensive side. And during timeouts, that's one of the questions I will always ask is what do you see? And players are always, you can see like their mind processing and they're thinking about what they saw. And what they saw or what they're thinking probably didn't happen in the game. They're just going through their thoughts. So it's pretty cool to ask players what they see because what they see in which might be completely different. And that's where the film study comes in, like being able to ask that question in real life and real game situations, but then come back and actually watch what really happened. And there's so many times where you see players after games, they're going through scenarios of what happened in a game, and it probably didn't happen A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So that's something that I'm definitely intrigued with is asking players what did they see because like I said, one of the areas is that I'm growing in is assuming that they saw what I saw.
Rarely do they see what we see. And
Yeah.
mainly, sometimes they see stuff that's better than us because they're actually in the game. And often players don't come in with their own bias. Whereas coaches, we come in with these bias. This worked in the past for me, or this
Yeah.
worked in the past for my team. So this should work for you. But that's obviously not always the case. With questioning there, my curiosity is, which you mentioned, is like when I ask them a question, this is a learned behavior. The ability to be able to answer and recall something that doesn't happen right away. Because as you said, the first thing is I'm stimulating them to think, and they're not used to that, or they're not used to giving an answer that actually helps them or helps you as a coach. So this process, I'm imagining for you with your team, improved throughout summer league, didn't it?
Oh yeah. I'm not sure because we have these players for such a short time, right? You're not having them for a whole year or a month. You have them for 3 or 4 days before you get into playing games. I'm sure a lot of the beliefs and a lot of the ways of practicing and teaching that we're doing it might be different, right? It might be new to them. But I definitely believe that once they leave being a part of our organization, go play wherever they go next, they definitely have learned something, whether that be, like you said, us doing small sided games and teaching them through film. That's what teaching is about. We want you to be better than when you came here. And then when you leave, we want you to be just a little bit better.
Love it. And for a player, I'm curious what you thought as a player versus what you think as a
Hmm.
coach when it comes to feedback, especially in-game feedback. We still see it a ton at coaching levels, especially at youth levels, where coaches are essentially guiding players on the sideline. Pass here, do this, go there, do that, and all that stuff. And I've always said to parents and coaches is as soon as you give them this type of information, you're taking away their ability to make decisions on their own, which is what leads to independent players, independent performers. So talk to me about that. What did you like as a player in terms of feedback in game? And then now how does that come together for you as a coach?
Like me as a player, I wanted as much feedback as possible. One thing that I would tell coaches, like my first as a pro, like coming, especially in Europe, I would say treat me like a rookie. Don't assume that I know everything that you know. There's nothing that I don't want to learn. And then as I transition to coaching, like I mentioned before, that's like a growth edge of mine is assuming that players know what I know. So like to the much as I can, I'm just trying to make sure that these guys are all rookies, whether they be 10, 15-year vets or first or second year, just trying to treat everybody with the mindset of growth mindset, trying to teach as much as I can. But yeah, that's something that I've been, like I said, trying to do as best as I can. But yeah.
I think that's a misconception that has been dispelled quite a bit about NBA players in particular, or professional players in general, about that they don't want feedback. They do. They want to
Hmm.
get better. In
Oh
fact, they
yeah,
crave it
sure.
somewhat more, don't they? Whereas I feel with young players, we give them too much feedback and not enough time to explore, right? Where we give them
Hmm.
feedback and now this is okay, now they're going to just do this because I told them about this. Whereas young players need time to explore. Professionals probably need more specific information, as you said, that can help them that 1% more. So talk to us about that process. If you're going to give feedback to a player, how are you going to do it? What does it look like?
So because of my position and my role as a coach, I'm not on the court and I'm not talking to guys directly during the game. But just going off of my past summer league, I try to give them feedback. I want to say when they sub out of the game, I let them calm down and catch their breath first and let them collect their thoughts. Because if you come and give them feedback right away, emotions are high, whether they made a bad play or made a bad foul, and you ask them right away, they're going to be emotional about it. So I tend to give them some time to recuperate and get their thoughts together. And then I give the feedback on what I think happened. And that's when I ask, what did you see? It's crazy because there's times in timeouts, we'll be in a huddle and I'll just ask them, what did you see? Or I ask guys, what did you see? And let them start that conversation amongst each other. Because like you said, we can be biased in what we saw. But if I just start that question of, hey guys, what did you see? It's crazy to see that these guys are like, they're beating us on back doors or this guy's a shooter. Instead of me saying it, I think players saying that to each other give that player empowerment. You empower the player, but you also start conversation amongst them, and they're the ones on the court. So that's why I enjoy giving that type of feedback.
I'm glad we're having this conversation because I want this to become more mainstream because I see it in like general media, like criticizing coaches who empower
Mhm.
players. No, this isn't like what coaching is. And I'm like, maybe it's not what coaching used to be, but people like
Yeah.
yourself and other coaches that have dove into the evidence-based research behind why you're doing this and why you're empowering players to communicate with each other more and make decisions more and the value of that. We need to spread this because this is more the reality of modern coaching than anything is that
Hmm.
players are a part of the process and it's not just this dictator above that tells them exactly what to do.
Yeah. And that's, you think about, I'm a big reader. I think leaders are readers. I think about John Wooden. And there's an excerpt in his book where he's talking about the games, going from practice to the games. And he said when the game started, like he could just sit down and not have to do anything because they practiced so much and they did what they were supposed to do in practice so much that the game's already been taken care of. So I think about that now, right? If you practice the right way through your small sided games and your group invasion games, you're doing what you're supposed to do in practice. When the game comes, that's the players and their team's job to handle. Now, the coach's job to make adjustments and make tactical adjustments, and you want to make, okay, they're beating us on this halftime, make a change or whatever. But as the guys are out there, it's their turn to run the show.
I love it. I know coaches love hearing about different books because I think generally you said leaders are readers. So give us some of the books maybe over the last little while that have really influenced you. You mentioned the Doug Lemoff book already.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Doug Lemoff, his book, Coach Scott, that was an inspirational book for me because of it gave me the blueprint of how I want to teach. And of course, being around you guys giving me anecdotes to become a better teacher. Book I love, Atomic Habits by James Clear. Everybody knows that. Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. One I'm reading right now, The Mid-Range Theory. That's a great book. There's just so many. I can go all day. Do you have any books for me?
I love it.
I know you got a couple.
Oh my gosh, I have to think too about what I'm reading right now. And it is beautiful because again, it's not just books nowadays, whether it's podcasts or books or different types of short information books. I'll be honest, I read a lot more research than I read books nowadays, just because
That's reading.
Yeah,
that's reading. That's the same thing.
Because I have access to it. And in the past, like I think about it 30 years ago, 20 years ago, when I was doing my master's and learning some of the skill acquisition stuff, like people don't remember, but you used to have to go to a library and you have to look up a book and different things like that. And now it's available and accessible. And man, it's such a powerful time to be able to learn. But also there's a danger because it's almost too much information sometimes for us. So maybe take us through your process, Phil, in terms of, okay, you're filling your cup all the time. How do you now help yourself figure out what am I actually going to use? What am I actually going to apply to help players? Because that's ultimately the goal of all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like for me, where I'm at, like you said, I'm trying to fill my cup as much as I can. When I get put into a role to where I'm having to do less of, I'm doing a lot of quote unquote busy work, things that are helping the team, helping each other. Like I'm assisting a lot. So in the future, when I become a head coach or I'm able to have more responsibility in that state, I would think that my reading and all that would be lower because I'm doing more. But right now, my goal right now is just to learn as much as I can. I'm taking so much notes. I'm a big note taker. Like I said, I journal a lot, and then I try to collect it and I try to organize it. So I'm not sure when I'll like dial it down. But right now, I'm just trying to just get as much information, especially through this transition period of going from player to coach. There's so much that I don't know. Like you talk about skill acquisition and you got your master's and like that type of information I don't have, right? To where like I played in NBA, you don't have that information, right? We both are lacking in areas and I'm trying to
That's
improve
why
in the
we're great
area.
teammates, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what makes a good team. And that's why coaching, you have a team. And I think that's one of the biggest strengths that working with Joe Mazzulla is he has great coaches around him. He has great teammates. And he's able to get the best out of everybody. And he's open-minded, man. It's amazing. And being in the situation I am now has taught me to think different.
That's beautiful. And you have mentioned this kind of in different ways similarly, but another challenge for transitioning from player to coach is patience, right? It's patience. It's this process of being humbled and being able to learn, which you've outlined for us. But talk to us about patience too, because now you're on another journey. You already went through a journey where you went from grassroots to college to NBA to pro, all these different things. And now you're back on this process of climbing this ladder again. So talk to us about the patience.
I relate everything to me being a point guard and my playing days, because that's what I did my whole life. So that's something that I think a point guard has to be is patient, right? You can't always try to score 20 points right away. You have to take your time and assess and analyze the game. You have to be patient. As I go through my next career, patience is everything, right? Being able to, like I said, sit back and learn and grow and develop and be patient. And opportunities are going to come. You just have to be patient. And throughout a season, you can take patience the same way. It's a long season. So you have to be patient and know when to pick your spots, know when to teach a player or coach a player hard, and know when to back off. Patience is, I say patience is a virtue, man. Patience is a virtue.
I can't have you on and not talk about point guard play. Obviously, it's a
Okay.
passion of yours. I reference it to all young players that I want you all to be a point guard, whatever position you end up playing, because
Yep.
those skills transfer to any team, any level. So talk to us about the process of developing a point guard, particularly with some of this knowledge that you have now.
Yeah.
What are some areas that you really focus on?
Like as a player, being a point guard, I think that a point guard is a great decision maker, right? On and off the court. And that's something that my father instilled in me, like accountability. He was always harping on me about we're running sprints, right? The point guard has to be first. Where if we have any plays in the offense, like I have to know where everybody is on the court. I have to know the five position just like I know the point guard position, just like I know the wing position. So that's something that has stuck with me. Then on the defensive side, right, picking up full quarter, you're the point of attack on the defense. So being able to be that on the defensive side, but then you're also a vocal leader, right? You're an extension of the head coach. So if you have a great point guard, I look at point guards like quarterback. If you have a great point guard as a head coach, you guys should be 1-1. Like there was times where I'll be coming down the court and I'll be calling two side, and the coach is calling two side as well. And that's like where you want to be at as a point guard. And the only way you can do that is through film study. The more film you study, the more time you practice for the test. Once the test comes, you just flow. So anything that I learned as a point guard is transitioning into coaching helps me.
So here's the challenge, I think, and this is maybe more for grassroots and youth, is that
Yeah.
at a really young age, and I think this is a problem, at a really young age, we tend to define this is the player that's going to bring the ball up. And then players fall into
Mm-hmm.
that role. That's a player that brings up the ball. And
Oh
we
yeah.
don't know who the best point guard is yet because
Yeah.
everyone's developing. So that's obviously a challenge. It's like the tradition of this is the smallest player, they bring up the ball because they're the best ball handler.
Mm-hmm.
But you're 11, you're 12. Who knows what you're going
Yeah.
to be, right? At 16.
Exactly.
Have you given
Yeah.
any
That
thought to
that's
that process? Yeah.
oh yeah, for sure. And I don't think just because you're quote unquote the point guard that you should bring the ball up the court. If you look at like Draymond Green for the Warriors, he's not the point guard, but he's the guy who's making most of the decisions like a point guard. And that's something that me at a younger age, I wish I was more of. I wish I played more off the ball because my whole career I played on the ball. I play in Europe where they're more free flowing and they play more. The balls move more, and you have to be able to play off the ball more. Transitioning to with the Celtics, we do the same thing. We want our guys to play off the ball. We don't want one person dribbling the ball all the time. That's something that I wish I got better at the youth level. So I don't think there really should be a point guard in the youth because you don't know what you're going to be, right? Just because you're a point guard today doesn't mean you're going to be a point guard tomorrow. Just because you're a five, quote unquote, today doesn't mean you're going to be a five tomorrow. Just constantly worried about developing and growing. That's the most important thing I think at the youth level.
I'm so glad you said it that way. You said it better, which is like the main value is that you're going to learn something else, a skill that's going to help you sometime else, somewhere else, and different things like that. And particularly, as you said, playing off the ball. So how did you develop that ability now? Because I know you handled the ball most of your life,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're in Europe, as you said, and a lot of times you're giving it up and you're moving and you're now off the ball. So talk to me about that process there, and then how do you help players develop that understanding of how to play better off the ball?
Yeah, I learned that really this year. Like I saw it as I was playing, but once I changed the glasses and became a coach, I always was a coach, but like now that I have the title of a coach, um, Missoula talks about that all the time. Like, oh, this guy has to play off the ball, or he might be a point guard, quote unquote, but we need him to play off the ball. So the more you can do on the court, the more you're gonna play. So don't put yourself in the box and say, "Oh, I'm only a two, I'm only a five, or I'm only." Like I think the numbers are dated. Point guard, shooting guard, I think those are dated. I think it's more about being a basketball player. If you look at Drew Holiday and Derek White, those guys are basketball players. Traditionally, you had the point guard bringing the ball up the court, But if you want to play more, the best is, like you said, is develop these other skills. If you're strong in one area, it's better to develop more skills at the youth level. So when you become a pro or you be going into college or high school, you're able to play more because you can do more.
Yeah, it's really reflected in how your team played this year, where again, and you're not the only team. There's so many teams that are matchup based nowadays, where it's like, who has the
Yeah,
best matchup to bring up the ball, or who has the best matchup to play in the dunker spot?
exactly.
Different things like that. And that variability is an application of skill acquisition in some contexts where the defense never gets used to one alignment or one shape or one thing. It's always variable and it's always based on where can we create the biggest advantage.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, you say in the dunker, like I was never in the dunker as a player. But like why not? Why not be in the dunker? Why not be in the corner? Because it's team based depending on who you're playing, depending on the personnel you have. And if it's crazy because I already knew this because my father played multiple positions. My father was a point forward, so he was able to do multiple things. But now it's just I think size has changed the game, right? You got bigs that are bringing the ball up the court, and you have wings who are multi-positional who can do multiple things. So I just think as the game evolves and grows at the pro level, it has to evolve and grow at the youth level as well.
Your father was a heck of a player, but he would have been even better, I feel, in that type of system.
Oh yeah, for sure. But he didn't shoot threes, so
He would have probably. That's the
yeah,
thing.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
He was
yeah,
not
for
allowed
sure.
to, or he wasn't told to, or different things
Exactly,
like that. But yeah, you're
exactly.
definitely a better shooter than your father. Have you had some of these conversations with your father? Because when I have conversations with former players, they're
Hmm.
like, sometimes they're a little defensive. I'm not saying your father is, but they're
Yeah,
a little defensive. They're saying, this worked for me. Why are we
yeah,
doing it different?
yeah, for sure. And that's the beautiful thing about my family is that we're all lifelong learners. But if you've seen how time evolves over time, you have to be able to think in a way to you're always open minded, like no matter what. And the game has changed every decade. Every now it's like even quicker. There was a time when there was no shot clock, right? There was a time when there was no 3-point line. There was a fouls, how the game was officiated was different. So if you're still thinking about when that time or you're still coaching how that time was, it's going to be difficult for you to adapt to the game. So my dad, he's definitely open minded, but there's still some core fundamental values that are going to be timeless. Like it doesn't matter. So I still take that from him, but I also try to teach him some of the things that I'm learning, some of the things I'm reading and researching, similar to you, and try to mesh the two.
Phil, I'm so grateful you shared with us. Now everyone's going to see what I saw when I had conversations with you.
Yeah,
Just this, and I think you're just such a great representation of so many young coaches that are hungry to learn and to seek out better ways because now we have this evidence-based research, this access to it, this access to these different types of minds. And it's just a beautiful thing to be able to watch you and see you grow. And I'm happy for you and all your success. And I know it's going to keep going. And we're grateful to get you at the bottom of the ladder as you climb.
yeah.
And we can't wait to see where you go. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Chris, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Basketball Immersion, for helping me grow and learn and develop. I know there's big things coming. Anybody who's listening and watching, tune in.